You mentioned briefly earlier that in the back of your head at some point was this sense of practically what should I pursue? You know? And for me, that was actually orchestral conducting. And so while I was at Louisville, I was doing a lot of conducting as well as composing. And I had this idea that I wanted to do a conducting degree after Louisville to sort
Mm.
of give myself that professional, like, I need things besides just being a composer, and I'm
Yeah.
still not a good performer. So maybe, but I loved conducting. And so I was looking at competitive international scholarship programs like Fulbright, and I was applying for Fulbright, and I applied through Fulbright to a program in England that was all like contemporary conducting. And Louisville had a really robust office of competitive fellowships. So they were basically there to help students apply for these competitive
Yeah.
scholarships. And one of the other things about my background is my mom's parents were from Ireland. And when I was an undergrad, I did a 1 month program in Belfast on conflict studies, like completely unrelated. I was also an English major as an undergrad, and I did my thesis on Ulysses by James Joyce. So I was really interested in my Irish background. I still had family in Ireland. I had met them. And this all came up as I was talking about Fulbright with this woman who led the office. And she was like, you know, I know you want to do Fulbright, but have you heard of the Mitchell Scholarship? I was like, "No, what's that?" And basically, the Mitchell Scholarship is this competitive fellowship for American undergrads to go and do a master's degree in Ireland. And she said, I know you have this idea about this particular program. You should see if there's something you can do in Ireland that's the same." And so I was sort of shopping around for things in Ireland with the idea of finding something so that I could apply for the scholarship and go. And I wound up connecting with John Godfrey, who's at the time was head of the department at UCC. And I was telling him about my ideas. And he basically said, like, he was very receptive to the ideas, but he was like, look, this isn't a conservatory, but you can certainly put something together if you want to. So, like, you could do a performance degree where you're putting an ensemble together and like being part of the scene in Cork. I was like, oh, cool. That would be really interesting, actually. I got the scholarship. I let him know that I got it, and he was like, great. By the way, yesterday we just got this new degree approved, and I think you should do that
Wow.
instead.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And it was like, oh, cool. And the scholarship was okay with it, and I was like, "This actually looks really interesting," like, and I think there would be ways for me to pursue what I want to pursue anyway, even if I do this degree. And so when the time came, I graduated from Louisville, and then I went to Ireland, and I enrolled in that experimental sound practice degree instead. Basically, the motivation of the program was recognizing that there are so many different facets of sonic art that don't require or whose practitioners don't have training in Western classical experience, which is obviously the maybe besides jazz and maybe besides some music tech, it's like the way that you study music in higher ed.
Right.
And so the coursework for the degree was based on just like what are these practices outside of that are sort of on the fringes of music and of different artistic practices or artistic communities. And so the coursework included like lots of improvisation, lots of digital media and electronics. We had a whole course called Expanded Instrument Systems, which is based on Pauline Oliveros's Expanded Instrument
Mm.
System. Field recording, sound art. We had sort of the more theoretical side was we had a sound studies class, which was all about just sort of scholarship involved with sound. And yeah, I mean, it was totally transformative. Like I think if Louisville, thinking, Worcester to Louisville, if Louisville was a real expansion and pulling me from what I learned at Worcester into very now practices of contemporary classical music, Cork was like, okay, great. Here's everything else.
Yeah.
um, and I realized that like I loved everything else, and that even I had so much terrific experience and real fondness for the classical tradition by the time I got to Cork. But in a lot of ways, I was still grappling with this sort of imposter syndrome sense of like, I'm still bad at sight singing, or like, I still
Mm,
can't play piano. And even when you're a composer, my sense has always been like, people kind of expect you to have some of those musical skills that you're not actually spending a ton of time cultivating, and a lot of composers have them. And I
yeah.
had this sense of like, I just don't, or I don't feel like I do. Or if I do, it takes me a lot of time and energy to build those skills back up. And it's not how I want to spend my time. And then I got to Cork and we were doing all of this work. And I was like, oh my gosh, I actually have been building musical
Mm,
skills, but it's all these things about like sensitivity to listening or sensitivity to gesture and texture, or like thinking about space or thinking about more holistic experiences. And I just had never tapped into it because that wasn't the focus of coursework
right.
previously. So I really just wound up running with most of the practices that we learned about in Cork because they resonated so strongly with me and with my, I guess, my sense of musical and artistic priorities and sonic priorities. And yeah, it was a 1-year program, and, like, that year, there's before I was in Cork and
Mm.
after I was in Cork in terms of what I do as a creator.
Yeah, you're talking about how, I guess, philosophically you had been kind of cultivating these things that you ended up kind of expanding upon in Cork. Had you practically done any of this stuff? Had you done, like, free improv before?
No.
Had you worked heavily in, like, the electroacoustic space prior to your time
No,
there? Yeah.
almost not at all. I mean, we actually had a really robust electronic music area at Louisville, and the professor who does electronics there, Christoph Folek, is like really terrific. But I took the sort of year-long sequence where we learned Max MSP
Mm,
and then did not. And I was just like,
yeah,
okay. And in honesty, what I did instead was I focused on conducting. Right?
yeah.
Like, I think some people went back to the electronics and I went more towards the conducting, which was terrific, and I don't regret that at all. I had a terrific time doing that. So when I got to Cork, I had used Max MSP before. I had used DAWs a little bit. Like, I was still pretty bad at using a DAW. So I knew enough to be situated, but not any of the practical knowledge almost at all. I hadn't done any free improv. I also something that became really important was I hadn't done any extended vocal stuff,
Mm,
and I'd always been interested in that, even, like, going back to when I was a kid, like, listening to screamo, like, a genre based around
yeah, sure.
someone doing extended vocal technique, and certainly I was really interested in composers who were doing pieces like that, and I was in this sort of performance new discipline trio at Louisville. But one of the things I did in Cork was the head of the theater department was his background was like operatic voice and composition, and he sort of moved sideways into theater. And I took a class with him called Cultures of Voicing that was actually for theater students. And it was all about how to use your body to explore different vocal
Mm,
techniques and different timbres. And for their purposes, to the end of like adopting different characters or
right.
doing voice acting or even just sort of diversifying their range as a performer. But for me, it was like permission to do a bunch of vocal techniques that I was still hesitant to do because, I sang in choir when I was at Worcester and Louisville, and any when you're in any vocal context that's related to Western classical music, it's like you will either sing this the right way or you will die.
It's
And
very pure
yeah, and
sound.
not
Yeah.
in the sense of like you will die because I will kill you. You will die because your throat will explode, right?
Yeah.
Like it's,
Right.
and and then I was like watching these undergrads in Cork doing these incredible sounds with their voice. And I was like, oh, you just have to like do it. Like,
Yeah.
like, having a little bit of scaffolding about breathing technique and feeling your body and making sure that you're not straining, but then you can just, like, go. You can just do this, and that was really liberating for me. So, yeah, pretty much down the line, if you look at the coursework from that degree in Cork, it was like, "Oh, that's where James started doing that, and that's where James started doing that, and that's where James started doing that."
You're doing a good job of selling this program because even I'm sitting here like, maybe I should do this.
I have sold it to people, and
Yeah.
people have gone because 'cause I've told them to do it. I think there are programs that maybe could be like this in the States. Like, I think what Cal Arts does is perhaps similar to what they do
Mm,
in Cork, but, I mean, in terms of my trajectory, it was such happenstance that I wound up at Cork at all, and it was such happenstance that this program got approved the year that I went.
yeah.
And while I was there, I found out later that there was more of a traditional conservatory style school in Cork. And the first semester I was there, I took more conducting lessons because I still had this idea in my mind. And, like, it was fine, but I had this sense of, like, thank God I did not do another year of conducting because this is just like, I did this already. Like, I wouldn't have grown at all if this is where I
Yeah.
had wound up. And at UCC, I grew in ways I just didn't even know existed.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Micromaker by Loose Leaf Transmissions. We hope you enjoyed this brief glimpse into the inner workings of the creative life. If this resonated with you, be sure to check out the full conversation on Music Maker with Tyler Kline, a podcast exploring craft and process, philosophy and inspiration, and the honest, often messy parts of being an artist, creative uncertainty, purpose and identity, and resilience. You can find Music Maker wherever you get your podcasts or by visiting musicmakerpodcast.com.